And there was a good chance MiGs were going to be up, because you got 40 airplanes now going downtown Hanoi, and you know that something's going to happen. And I went to the skipper and I said, Skipper, we are short 2 fighters. One of those fighters is CAG's airplane. His change of command is next week, and he's got it spit shining down in the hangar bay. And we can't use that airplane because it's going to go to his change of command. I said, we need to take that fighter. And he said, well, Duke, if you can get the missiles on, get it fueled up before we take off, you can go on the mission. Well, I knew the ordnance chief and got the airplane up on the flight deck. We got it, the purple shirts got it all fueled and stuff. I was the last one to take off on that flight. Got up and flew, and now we're going toward Hanoi. And first mistake made was that the lead aircraft, CAG was not the leader of the flight, it was A7s and A6s. But we were hitting a railroad yard, and we actually overflew the target. And CAG said, hey, the target is behind us. My mission that day, I was in a Phantom, but I had Rockeye on board. I was supposed to take out any AAA and SAM sites and then pitch off and become a fighter. The problem is you get all that crap under your wings. It's a lot of drag. And so the problem was that all of the squadron turned back in a single line from a single direction and came down, and we lost 2 airplanes right there to AAA. Commander Blackburn, the XO of the sister squadron, and Steve Rudloff were shot down. Commander Blackburn didn't come back, and we lost another airplane that day also coming back. But I pulled off target. I rolled in, and there was so much AAA, and a couple SAMs had gone off. And I saw a railroad yard there where we were bombing, and there was some guns and stuff firing. So my wingman, Brian Grant, I said, Brian, follow me in, and he was kind of in a loose position here. And as we pulled off target, I pulled off in the lead like that. I remember telling Willie Driscoll, my back seater, I said, Willie, watch this. And we turned, and you could see where the Rockeye had gone through this target. And about that time, Brian was in a position like this, and he said, Duke, MiG 17 at 7 o'clock. And as I reversed, there was a MiG with his nose down in a position like this, and like I heard you say, you can see the wings light up. They had 23 and 37 millimeter cannon, and all 3 of those things were winking at us. And 2 days prior to that, I had put 12 Gs on a Phantom. I broke the airplane was down. I broke both flap hinges, pulled the flaps, broke the flap angle on, overstressed the airplane bad. But I mean, he was going to gun me. And I remembered, well, I did that 2 days ago, and the guy rendezvoused on me with that 17. He outturned me. But I could see a lot of closure rates, so I broke into him. He overshot, and his wingman behind him, 3 of them went vertical like this. And now you're looking to say, can I reverse and get from here to there before these guys can get from here to you? And it's close, and that's what training is about, because you've been through that in the tactical training that you have, and the timing and the kind of airplanes they have, how fast they'll turn. And as he overshot, I reversed, squeezed the trigger. He was actually in minimum range, but by the time the missile came off, he blew up, and now the others came on me. And the point I'd like to make is, I used to write 3 hours a day. I'd put things on a board and give lectures on MiG-17, MiG-19, and MiG-21, their capabilities. And I'd go through switchology drill. And the guys used to say, Duke, we're never going to see MiGs. What are you doing all this for? We haven't seen MiGs in years. And so when we trained, I said, you need to train just like every day you're going to see a MiG. And when the MiG had overshot, one of the guys in that day got behind dead 6 o'clock behind a MiG, squeezed the trigger twice, and he forgot to go to arm. And in the Phantom, you had to go to arm. We had bombed a target, so we had 172 mils in there for Rockeye. I had to roll up and set 35 mils in the gun sight. But as I had pulled off, just like in training, and the guys had made fun of me when I'm coming off the targets in South Vietnam, why, Duke, are you going through, you call 35 mils, set arm, set labs direct, ready, and that way you can pickle off your understores and still have your missiles. Well, as I came off the target, the one thing I did right that day is I'd set 35 mils in, I'd gone to arm, I had labs ready, direct, 3 different switches, and when this guy overshot, all I had to do is hit the pickle and everything went. And I was already in arm, reverse, and sometimes in real combat, if you got anything more than to do to squeeze a trigger, it's too much. And then he blew up. So it's training in everything that you do. You may train for 20 years, and everything you train yourself for may happen in 10 seconds. But that 10 seconds is going to make or break. You're either going to die, you're going to live, you're going to be successful, or you're not. And so the training, the teamwork, and all that's important. That was the first kill that day.
Again, you have a unique perspective in having a historical wealth of experience to bring to us, but also a current view on defense. Do you feel, and we've gone back and forth with fighter training and air combat maneuvering training, sort of lessons learned and relearned. Do you feel that today's training mix in any of the services with regard to fighter training is correct? And also, do you, if I could get you to comment, I guess, on the hardware that we're fielding today, the numbers of aircraft, the type of aircraft?
Well, I'm an Air Force guy fighting for an Air Force weenie airplane called the F-22 because it's the only airplane that can compete against Su-30 and Su-37. I can't get into specifics, but take a look at the lessons learned in a recent fight with F-15s in India. And if that doesn't scare the hell out of you and get in to train and learn, and we need new aircraft. And things like that are important for me in my job, and I just sat down with Jerry Lewis, the chairman of Defense Appropriations, and Jack Murtha, a Democrat, good friend of mine, he's the ranking minority member. I met with Senator Stevens and forced him to look at this stuff, because if you look at the equipment that the enemy has today, our kids are dying 9-1 against Su-27 and Su-30. And the A-10, A-11, the A-12 missile and helmet-mounted sights, where we used to have superior training, superior equipment, and superior weapons. Today, that's not true. And that airplanes coming out like Joint Strike Fighter, are they going to meet the threat even today of Su-30? And they won't come out for 8 to 10 years. And the F-22 right now is the only airplane that will meet that threat against Su-30 and Su-37. And it's critical. The lessons learned that we had, I had better training, I had an airplane, and my missiles were better than the enemy's. And you put those factors together and you're live today. The other aspect of that, the lessons learned when the Air Force F-15s went in against the Indian Air Force, this is training, not combat, but when they went against the Indian Air Force, they had intelligence on what those weapon systems, what the radars, what the jammers, what the missiles, what the aircraft performance was, and it was totally wrong. So the intelligence agencies, and I met with George Tenet the day of 2 days ago, which turned out to be not a big thing because he left us. Maybe that's why he resigned. But I met with all of our intelligence guys and I said, hey, DOD and DIA needs to give us the real skinny on the weapon systems that we're facing. And if we don't do that, it's going to be important to these kids out here that are strapping those airplanes on your butts, because you need to know what the bad guy has. You need to know what his capabilities are. If you do a wave down maneuver, you fire your missiles, you do a wave down maneuver and the other guy does a wave down and you start coming back at him and you don't even know that he's got 2 missiles coming at you, then that's a big thing. So it is important on the weapon systems. I'm taking a look at Joint Strike Fighter. Of course, the industry gets mad at me. They say, Duke, we're not going to give you any campaign money. And I said, fine. I'm not going to put these kids' butts in an airplane that won't do the job.
How, from your view, do we balance the need to do what you're talking about, which is to constantly upgrade our aircraft and training and ensure that we have the finest hardware, when we're also facing primarily, or at least the focus now is against asymmetric threats, when you talk about the war on terrorism and threats that don't have Su-30s and Su-35s. How do we balance that? The
war on terror is different. I mean, they're not flying Su-30s. And I will tell you, kids, and I say kids because most of you are young enough to be my sons and daughters, there's a very good chance we will be struck before November. Al-Qaeda does what Al-Qaeda finds is successful, and when Spain capitulated, it threw us into a whole new scare ball game. And recent intelligence shows there's a very high probability that the United States will be struck before November elections, trying to do the same thing they did in Spain. And we need to pay attention to that, but we also need to look at the superpowers. China is building Su-30s now. India is doing that. Israel is giving jammers and upgrading old MiG-21s to where we can't even see the radars. And if you don't keep up to speed with the threat that could be, can you imagine if we try and go into Taiwan if something happens? I mean, just the ships, the Aegis cruisers trying to get through the straits here are going to be in deep kimchi with from the Chinese. And if you don't pay attention to that, Russia is, quote, a friendly now. I don't believe that. The aircraft that they're putting out, if you look at China and the threats that they have, the Indian Air Force, and look across in your manuals at the different countries that have the threats that could face you, that we could go into any day. Now, where we are right now, no, they don't. But other areas that we could go into, North Korea, China, India, Pakistan, Iran, yes, they do. And so you need to fight that. One of the areas that we have lost a big edge in, I fought everything that had wings on it. I fought against F-4s, I fought against the Air Force F-106s up at McCord, fought against F-5s, anything, old F-9s, anything that would fly and out-turn us, we flew against. Our adversary programs are defunct today. The Indian Air Force, they're flying against MiG-21s, they're flying against MiG-27s, 29s, 30s, and 37s. And so every day they're flying dissimilar aircraft. And a lot of the other parts of the world are too, and that's real scary. But let me go into another thing back on 10 May, because there's another lesson learned. When I was a student, they told me I couldn't beat a Top Gun instructor, and I said, you give me a glider and a club and I'll beat this son of a bitch. And a little cocky, but I went out my very first day against a Top Gun instructor. It was his first flight. He'd just gone into Top Gun, and he was flying an A4 Skyhawk, and we set up a scenario to where I would come in on the A4 from a perch position. He would brake, force an overshoot, do a rolling scissors reverse, come on me, I'd brake and do this. And after the second one of these, I started off with an advantage, and not only shot him with a missile, but shot him with a gun. And I came back, and and as a cocky fighter pilot said, who can't beat a Top Gun instructor? I'm all of an ensign right now, okay? And the next day I went out, feeling cocky, and I went out against a guy named Dave Frost, who is now Admiral Frost. And went out in the same position, started off in an advantaged position. He broke in, reversed like this, came up, he came down, and I remember thinking, okay, I got through the first turn, forced an overshoot, and I thought, well, here goes the second Top Gun pilot. I'm going to come back and show him that I can beat a Top Gun instructor. Forced the overshoot on me and came back, and now it was disadvantage, disadvantage, disadvantage. In the pure vertical with Frosty and an A4 Skyhawk, and instead of humiliating a young, cocky fighter pilot, he thought he's going to teach him something that's going to save his butt someday. And I remember Frosty said, okay, Duke, roll, put your lift vector on me. He's over here. So I rolled. He said, now use 1G of gravity, pull, and if I early turn, you can go out my belly side. If I turn this way, go down straight over here. He early turned. I went through him like this. I had the nose too low, which meant that I was going to go down here and give him lateral separation to come to me. Frosty said, hold top rudder to hold the nose up. And he said, reverse, keep an eye on me. And I was arcing, I was turning the airplane, which was allowing him to then rendezvous. He said, unload the airplane and accelerate. And which he did, and he called 1,000, 2,000, 3,000, 4,000. You're out 5,000 feet, you're out of my gun range, come back and fight me. 10 May, 72, against a guy that had 13 American kills to his credit. I'm in a position like this with his gun on me like this, and it was like I could hear Frosty's voice. Okay, Duke, roll. put your lift vector on me, early turn me, don't dump the nose, reverse take a look. I held top rudder, I didn't arc, I accelerated, got out away from him and met him 3 times. The point is that I had been in the situation in training long before I ever got to combat, and that is a big advantage. And the second thing is, all of you are going to be teaching or working with kids that think they're God's gift to aviation. All of us do. All these guys up here did too. And they believe it, and rightfully so. You never go up thinking you're going to lose. But when that happens, you can always teach them something, and that's going to save their butts. And Frosty was that. He wasn't only just a good fighter pilot, he was a teacher.
Well, sir, you're the final interview of the Gathering of Eagles week. And in fact, you'll have the opportunity to meet with our students this evening. 1830 Hopper Lodge, the barbecue. It's a time where all the Eagles, the students can mingle, and you can kind of have one-on-one time. I was wondering if you had any final or closing thoughts to impart the class, either from your experiences or anything.
No.
Okay.
No. I just think that I'm still flying the F-15 up at Edwards chasing F-22. And I think that if you take some of the things that I've talked about as far as the teamwork with Willie White, Frosty, and the training that you have, going through your systems, whether you're driving a tank or you're flying an airplane, it's all going to boil down to just a few seconds and many times. And you're professionals. The second thing is there's been too many scandals in the services, kids. If you see somebody doing something that is not right, step forward, damn it, and say it. I don't care if it's the academy or if it's here, right here. We are professionals. The whole world is proud of you. And if a few guys do step out of line, don't criticize. I mean, the community, the America is still behind all of you. But damn it, if you see something wrong, don't be afraid to come up and stand forward. Last thing I'll tell you I think is most important. Same thing on 10 May. That last victory on the way out, I was shot down another time besides on an American airline. Coming out after the 3rd kill that day, we're flying, we've got all of our airplanes going out, and the MiGs are still, they're basically retiring, licking their wounds. And going out, I heard a call called Sam, Nam Dinh. And Nam Dinh was over here. And just as I looked over at this town down here, you could see the missile coming up. We didn't have warning like we did, and I know it was working because I had SAM warnings before that. And we figured what they did is they can fire it ballistically without using the fan-song radar and just kind of guide it up there, and then they can explode it. Kill probability is low, but if you don't see it coming, it can be devastating. You have no warning. Just as I started to break into the airplane, into the missile, it went off. And it was like somebody took 1,000 BBs and threw against the airplane. And luckily, I hadn't seen it earlier, because as I broke, if I'd have broke this way, I think it would have gone through and taken Willie and I both out. But here, it hit and went under the whole airplane. It cut hydraulic and fuel lines because the airplane was on fire from about here to that wall back there. Because Willie said, "Duke, it's getting hot back here." And I looked and I said, "Willie, don't get out of this airplane. I don't want to be a prisoner of war." And I looked at the primary hydraulic system, and it was fluctuating, just like your oil pressure was, that I heard your story. And PC2 was fluctuating, utility was fluctuating, and then PC1 went to 0. And I'd lit the burner. I didn't have to worry about burning the gas because it was already on fire behind us. And I could see the Gulf of Tonkin about 40, 50 miles away. And I put the airplane into a climb, and it got just going as fast as I could, and then the airplane rolled and it went upside down. And like some of you, the only time I'd ever asked for any guidance from up above was when I was in trouble. And I remember thinking, God, I don't want to be a prisoner of war. Get my ass out of here. And the airplane was upside down, you're like over downtown Hanoi, I put the stick of that burning Phantom over to the left-hand side and pushed the rudder, and it slowly righted itself, and everything went stable for a second. I remember thinking, God didn't have anything to do with riding this airplane, it's just my superior flying skills. But about that time, the airplane went back upside down. And I remember thinking, I said, God, don't get me, I didn't mean it, get me out of here. And we're able to roll the airplane some 40 miles. And because of another story I'd heard of a guy named Duke Hernandez that took a hit and used rudder and power to kind of control the airplane. The Air Force version actually has a switch in there, a little trim switch, in which you can use to help you with that. We didn't. But we finally got to a point where the beach was right here, and I heard a loud explosion, and the airplane went into a spin. And I'd always briefed Willie that if we ever really had to eject, so there wouldn't be any miscommunication, I'd say, Willie, eject, eject, eject. And I only got Willie E out, and bang, he was gone. I remember thinking, my seat's not going to work, and I started to reach here and pull, and about that time it went up the rail. And we coming down in a parachute, though I still thought, because we're coming down just outside the mouth of the Red River. And I remember thinking, I'm going to be a prisoner of war. And they told us there were two things that would keep you alive as a prisoner. One was having a good family at home, which I didn't at the time. I hadn't met my wife yet. And the second was the faith in God, and I didn't have that. Well, kids, there's something in your life. You're going to have a period of time. Each one of you here is going to know someone probably is killed in combat, a close friend. You're going to lose a family. Maybe you lose your job or a child. And there's nobody in the world that you think that you can talk to. If you get on your knees, close your eyes, say a prayer, I guarantee you, somebody's going to listen.
Thank you, sir. Sir, on behalf of the class of 2004 of Air Command and Staff College, I'd like to present this gift to you. Thank you, sir.
I'm going to fill it with Pearl beer. Vote for George W. Bush. He's a great guy.